My employment was ended 1 year before my retirement pension vested. Purely corporate. I forced a slight smile. Understood. I then went home. My name is Kevin, I'm 54, and I thought I had it all figured out. For 22 long years, I was a senior mechanical engineer at Hartwell Manufacturing. We built industrial packaging equipment, the kind of massive, intricate machines that fill, seal, and label almost every product you can imagine. From food to pharmaceuticals, if it came in a bottle or a box, chances are Hartwell touched it. I started there at 32, after a decade of watching smaller engineering firms collapse around me. Hartwell was different. It was family-owned for 3 generations with solid benefits and a pension plan that actually meant something. It was a place where you could build a life, not just collect a paycheck until the next layoff. The Davenport family, they were good people. They understood that success came from keeping skilled workers. A revolutionary concept these days, right? And I didn't just build a career there. I built the machine. Back in 2009, Hartwell was in deep trouble. The recession hit manufacturing hard, and our old product lines were getting crushed by cheap overseas competitors. I remember sitting in a meeting watching Patricia Davenport, the CEO, lay it all out for us. Orders down 32%. Major clients jumping ship. She said if we didn't innovate, Hartwell might not survive another 2 years. The pressure was immense. That night I went home. I couldn't sleep. My mind was buzzing, obsessed with the problem. How do you make a sealing system faster without sacrificing quality? Everyone else was trying to make mechanisms speedier, but that just meant more heat, more wear, more failures. It was the wrong direction entirely. I knew there had to be a smarter way. For 18 grueling months, my garage workshop became my second home. Nights, weekends, vacation days I never actually took. I poured my heart, soul, and about $23,000 of my own money into developing a completely different solution. My wife, bless her heart, thought I was losing my mind tinkering away out there. But I knew I was onto something. I designed a rotary sealing mechanism that could process containers 40% faster than anything else on the market, with incredible precision. The secret? It was smart. It adapted in real time to every single container, adjusting pressure based on material and thickness. Glass, plastic, aluminum, didn't matter. It just worked. Now, pay close attention to this next part because it's absolutely critical. I developed this entire machine on my own time, with my own equipment, using my own money. My employment contract had a standard clause about IP created on company time or with company resources. But I was fanatically careful. Every component was purchased with my personal checking account. Every hour of development happened outside of work. I meticulously kept receipts, time logs, and dated photographs of my progress. I even had my neighbor witness and sign documentation, just to have a verifiable third party. Paranoid? Maybe. But I'd seen too many engineers get a plaque and a pat on the back while the company owned their genius. I wanted something different if this actually worked. When I finally brought my concept to Hartwell's leadership, they were intrigued, but also incredibly skeptical. They were bleeding money, had no capital for improving tech. Patricia Davenport loved the idea, but her CFO at the time kept shaking his head about the costs. So, I made them an offer they couldn't refuse. I'd license the patent to Hartwell exclusively for manufacturing and sales. In exchange, I'd receive a 3% royalty on every unit sold. The agreement was crystal clear. I retained full ownership of the patent. Hartwell got exclusive rights, but only as long as that licensing agreement remained active. Lawyers on both sides reviewed every single line. We signed. Patent number 8,234,567 was officially registered in my name. The Hartwell RS400 rotary sealing system launched in 2011, and let me tell you, it saved the company. Within 3 years, it wasn't just a product. It became Hartwell's flagship. Its speed and precision were exactly what the market desperately needed. We went from a struggling regional manufacturer to an industry leader. Orders poured in from across the country, then internationally. We even had to open a second production facility just to keep up. That machine, designed in my garage, was now generating 40% of the entire company's revenue. My royalty checks became substantial. Not quite buy a yacht money, but enough to pay off our house and build a really comfortable nest egg. My wife stopped calling me crazy and started calling me clever. That felt pretty damn good. More importantly, I was valued. I was promoted to senior engineer, given my own development team. Patricia Davenport would personally introduce me to clients as the guy who saved Hartwell, the guy who built the machine. For 15 years, that's who I was. The relationship worked. I treated them well, they treated me well. Then everything changed. The Davenport family decided to sell the company. Patricia was nearing 70, and her kids weren't interested in manufacturing. Private equity came calling, a firm out of Chicago with some bland, corporate-sounding name. By last spring, Hartwell Manufacturing was owned by Granite Peak Capital Partners. I knew what private equity meant. Everyone in manufacturing knows. They buy companies, slash costs, and flip them in 5 years. The employees who built the value? Discarded as operational inefficiencies. The new owners suck out the wealth and move on. But I thought I was different. I was essential. I held the patent to their most profitable product. My licensing agreement was ironclad. They couldn't touch me. All that careful planning back in 2009? I thought it would protect me now. Turns out I was only half right. The new leadership swept in within weeks. William Ashford, the new CEO, looked like he'd stepped right out of a business magazine. Perfect suit, perfect hair, a perfect smile that never quite reached his eyes. He had an MBA from some fancy school and a reputation for aggressive cost-cutting. Then there was his CFO, Douglas Brennan. Mid-40s, former consultant. He looked at spreadsheets like a surgeon eyeing a patient, figuring out what to cut. Every conversation with Douglas felt like an audit. He'd ask about headcount while I was trying to explain complex technical processes. He missed the point every single time. And the consultants. A whole team of young, expensive-looking people with clipboards, parading through our facilities. They'd stop, watch someone for a few minutes, scribble notes. Nobody ever explained what they were evaluating. That was the point, of course. Keep everyone nervous. Nervous people don't complain. The first 6 months under Granite Peak were uncomfortable but manageable. The layoffs started in support departments. Admin staff first, then middle management. Janice from accounting, who'd been there almost as long as me, got 2 weeks to clean out her desk. Our warehouse manager of 15 years? Replaced by someone younger, cheaper. The consultants kept circling our engineering division, but hadn't made a move. We were too valuable. The RS-400 was still the cash cow. You don't just fire the people who understand how to milk the cash cow, right? I kept my head down, did my job, hoped the storm would pass, collected my royalty checks, and tried not to think about the inevitable. Then came the pension review. Granite Peak's financial team did a deep dive into employee benefits. They discovered Hartwell's old pension plan was significantly underfunded. The Davenports had always covered the difference, but that wasn't Granite Peak's style. They wanted maximum short-term value. Pension obligations were a huge obstacle. Their solution? Elegant if you looked at it purely from a spreadsheet perspective. Offer an early retirement package to anyone within 18 months of their pension vesting. Otherwise transition to a 401k. I was 21 years into my employment. My pension vested at 22 years. 12 months. I was 12 months away from locking in benefits I'd earned for over 2 decades. The numbers weren't small. $4,200 a month for life, starting at 62. Health insurance subsidies, survivor benefits for my wife. Total lifetime value? North of $1.2 million. 12 months short and I'd get nothing. Just a meager 401k balance that was a fraction of what I'd been promised. My stomach dropped. The meeting with Douglas Brennan was on a Tuesday afternoon in March. His office, once a standard conference room, now had frosted glass walls and furniture that cost more than most of our assembly line workers made in a month. There was abstract art on the walls, the kind of art that exists just to prove you can afford art. Douglas was sitting behind his desk when I walked in, not bothering to stand or shake my hand like Patricia Davenport always did. He just sat there, papers neatly arranged in front of him like props in a play. "Kevin, thanks for coming in." He gestured to a chair. "Coffee?" I declined, sat down and waited. Silence makes people uncomfortable, I've found. Uncomfortable people talk more than they should. Douglas shuffled his important papers, clearly wanting me to see how many important papers he had. "I'm going to be direct with you because I respect your tenure here. We're restructuring the engineering division. Your position is being eliminated, effective 30 days from now." I didn't react. Just sat there processing. My face was a mask. Years of engineering had taught me that the first response is rarely the best. Gather data first, react later. Douglas took my silence as an invitation to continue. "You'll receive a severance package equal to 6 months' salary, plus any accrued PTO. Your health insurance will continue through COBRA for 18 months. It's a competitive package, given current market conditions." Still not a word from me. Douglas squirmed, adjusting his expensive cufflinks. "Look, Kevin, I understand you're close to pension vesting. Unfortunately, the restructuring timeline doesn't accommodate individual circumstances. It's just business. Don't take it personally. Those words. Just business. Don't take it personally. Two phrases that always mean the exact opposite. I nodded slowly. Just business. Exactly. He looked visibly relieved that I seemed to be taking it so well. We appreciate everything you've contributed over the years. Hartwell wouldn't be where it is today without your innovations. You mean the RS400? I asked. Among other things, yes, that product line has been tremendously valuable. His tone was rehearsed, slick, like he'd practiced it in front of a mirror. I stood up. Douglas extended his hand for a goodbye shake, a gesture meant to signal that this was all amicable, professional. Just two businessmen concluding a transaction. I took his hand, shook it firmly, and smiled. Okay, I said. No argument. No threats. No emotional outburst. Just acceptance. Douglas looked genuinely surprised. His rehearsed expression faltered for a second. Honestly, some of the other senior staff have been quite emotional about the transition. I kept smiling. Would pushback change anything? No. So I'll save my energy. Thanks for the conversation, Douglas. I walked out of his office. My pace steady. No hurry, no hesitation. I collected my personal items from my desk while my coworkers watched with that awkward sympathy, relieved it wasn't them. Tom from my engineering team stopped by. His face was pale. Kevin, I just heard. This is insane. You built this place. I shrugged. Apparently that doesn't matter anymore. What are you going to do? He asked. Go home. Figure things out. Don't worry about me, Tom. You've got your own situation to manage. He nodded slowly, still looking sick about it. Good kid. Probably next on the chopping block. I handed my badge to security, walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat for 3 minutes, collecting my thoughts. Then I drove home. My wife was in the kitchen when I walked in. She saw my face before I even said a word. They did it, she said, not a question. Yep. 30 days. Just business. Don't take it personally. She didn't say anything else. Just came over and hugged me. We stood there for a minute, then she stepped back, that look on her face she gets when she's thinking 3 moves ahead. What's the plan? I smiled. The same smile I'd given Douglas Brennan. I'm going to make a phone call. Sandra Mitchell had been my intellectual property attorney since I filed the original patent in 2009. She was in her early 60s now, semi-retired, only taking cases that truly interested her. Mine had always interested her. Something about an engineer who actually planned ahead for once. Sandra, it's Kevin. They just laid me off. I heard her chair creak over the phone. She was probably in her home office. Not anymore. When? Today. Effective in 30 days. 1 year before my pension vests. There was a pause. A long one. I could almost hear her brilliant mind working through the implications. Sandra had a particular way of processing problems. Methodical, thorough. The same traits that made her a good patent attorney made her dangerous in negotiations. Kevin, she said carefully, have you reviewed your licensing agreement recently? Not in a few years. Why? Because there's a termination clause. Section 12, paragraph 3. If either party materially breaches the spirit of the business relationship, the other party may terminate the licensing agreement with 30 days written notice. I remembered that clause. We'd included it as protection against Hartwell ever selling to someone who might exploit my technology. But I'd always assumed it was theoretical, a safety net I'd never actually need. Sandra continued, a reasonable argument could be made that terminating your employment specifically to avoid pension obligations, while continuing to profit from your intellectual property, constitutes a material breach of the business relationship spirit. Cutting you loose to save pension costs while continuing to profit from your IP could be seen as acting in bad faith. Would that argument hold up in court? I asked. Maybe, maybe not. Courts don't like subjective standards. The spirit of the relationship is hard to prove. But here's what would definitely hold up. The licensing agreement requires continued royalty payments. If they've stopped making them or attempted to invalidate your ownership, that's an unambiguous breach. When was your last payment? I thought about it. December. The Q4 payment came right on schedule. The Q1 payment wasn't due until the end of April. Check your employment termination paperwork, Sandra said. See if there's any language about the licensing agreement. I found the thick folder of legalese Douglas had handed me. Page 6. A single paragraph, buried in the miscellaneous provisions section. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. Designed to be missed. Employee acknowledges that all intellectual property developed during employment or related to company operations belongs to Hartwell Manufacturing LLC and agrees to assign any outstanding claims to such property as a condition of receiving severance benefits. They were trying to steal my patent. Quietly. Hidden in termination paperwork like some clause nobody would read. Sign here to get your severance. Oh, and by the way, everything you invented is now ours. Sandra, I said, my voice tight, I think we have a problem. She almost laughed. No, Kevin. They have a problem. They just don't know it yet. The next 2 weeks moved like a blur. Sandra assembled her legal dream team. Her partner handled corporate litigation. A younger associate specialized in patent disputes. Between them, they had more experience than Hartwell's entire legal department combined. I gathered every single document related to my patent. The receipts showing personal purchases. Bank statements proving the money came from my accounts. The time logs proving I'd worked outside of company hours. The dated photographs of my garage workshop, showing the prototype's progression. The signed witness statements from my neighbor. My original employment contract from 2002, which predated my patent work and contained no claims to independently developed IP. That contract had been superseded, but I'd checked every single update. Always read the fine print. Always. My paper trail was bulletproof. All that paranoia from 15 years ago? It was about to pay off. Sandra drafted a cease and desist letter. 16 pages of precise legal language. We reviewed it together on a video call. She explained each section. This paragraph establishes your undisputed ownership. This section details the licensing agreement terms. This part addresses their attempted fraudulent assignment in the severance documents. And this final section, Kevin, this is the kill shot. What's the kill shot? I asked, leaning in. She read it aloud, her voice steady, powerful. Therefore, pursuant to Section 12, Paragraph 3 of the licensing agreement, Kevin Patterson hereby terminates said agreement effective immediately due to Hartwell Manufacturing's material breach through attempted fraudulent acquisition of patent rights. Any continued manufacture, sale, or distribution of equipment incorporating U.S. Patent 8,234,567 shall constitute willful patent infringement subject to enhanced statutory damages of up to $150,000 per unit. My jaw dropped. How many RS-400 units did they produce last year? She asked. About 800. So, if they make even one more unit after receiving this letter, Sandra said, a glint in her eye, they're potentially liable for $150,000. If they make 100, that's $15 million. If they keep producing at current rates, they'll bankrupt themselves within a year. She smiled. Exactly. We sent the cease and desist certified mail to Hartwell's corporate headquarters. Copies went to William Ashford, Douglas Brennan, the legal department, the board of directors, and Granite Peak Capital Partners general counsel in Chicago. Then we waited. The first response came 18 hours after delivery confirmation. An email from Hartwell's general counsel, formal and carefully worded, requesting documentation supporting my ownership claims. A standard opening move. Pretend you don't know what you know until you see their cards. Sandra sent everything. The full package. 200 pages of receipts, photographs, contracts, witness statements. Let them see exactly how solid our position was. The second response came 2 days later. My phone rang. An unknown number, Chicago area code. Mr. Patterson, this is legal counsel for Granite Peak Capital Partners. We need to schedule an immediate meeting regarding your recent correspondence. I directed them to Sandra. She scheduled a video conference for the following Monday. Over that weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went fishing. Took my boat out on the lake, sat there with a line in the water thinking about nothing in particular. My phone stayed in the car. The fish weren't biting. Didn't matter. I wasn't really there for the fish anyway. Monday morning arrived. The video call was a spectacle. 6 people on their side, 2 Granite Peak lawyers in an expensive conference room, Hartwell's general counsel looking incredibly nervous, William Ashford looking annoyed, Douglas Brennan looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth, and someone introduced as a patent litigation specialist they'd retained from a big firm in New York. We're talking $400 an hour minimum for someone like that. On our side? Just Sandra and me. Her from her home office, me from my kitchen table. William Ashford spoke first. Kevin, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We have no intention of claiming your patent. That clause in the severance documents was standard boilerplate language. It shouldn't have been included in your specific situation. I didn't respond. Sandra had coached me, Stay silent, let them talk. The more they talked, the more they revealed. Douglas jumped in trying to help. We're prepared to remove that language from your severance agreement and honor the original terms. The licensing agreement can continue as structured. There's no need for legal action here. Sandra leaned forward into her camera. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant, but with an edge of steel. Let me make sure I understand. You're acknowledging that Hartwell Manufacturing has no claim to U.S. Patent 8,234,567, that my client retains full ownership, and that the licensing agreement remains the governing document for any use of that technology. Yes. Williams said quickly. Absolutely. This was all a misunderstanding. Good. Then you'll have no objection to signing an amended agreement that explicitly confirms those terms in writing. The lawyers on their side exchanged uneasy glances. The patent litigation specialist unmuted himself, his face carefully neutral, professional. What specific amendments are you proposing? Sandra shared her screen. A document appeared. 23 pages of revised licensing terms. She'd spent her entire weekend crafting this. First, explicit confirmation that Kevin Patterson is the sole owner of the patent, with no competing claims from Hartwell, Granite Peak, or any affiliated entity. Second, a revised royalty structure reflecting the current market value of the technology. The original 3% was negotiated when the RS-400 was unproven. 15 years of market dominance justifies a renegotiation. Third, audit rights allowing my client to verify accurate reporting of units sold. And fourth, a personal guarantee from Granite Peak Capital Partners that royalty obligations will be honored regardless of any future sale, restructuring, or bankruptcy of Hartwell Manufacturing. The silence stretched for a full 15 seconds. I watched Douglas Brennan's face go through 3 different shades of red. Those terms are significantly different from the original agreement, one of the Granite Peak lawyers said carefully. The original agreement was negotiated when my client was a valued employee with job security and pension benefits, Sandra replied, her voice never wavering. Circumstances have changed. My client's leverage has changed accordingly. Douglas Brennan finally exploded. This is extortion. You're holding our production line hostage. No, Sandra said, her tone unchanged. This is intellectual property negotiation. My client owns technology that generates 40% of your portfolio company's revenue. You tried to take that technology through a fraudulent assignment clause hidden in severance documents. You terminated my client specifically to avoid pension obligations while continuing to profit from his innovation. If you'd like to discuss extortion, we can add those facts to the public record when we file our patent infringement lawsuit. The patent litigation specialist leaned forward. Let's be careful about characterizations here. Mr. Brennan's comments were expressing frustration, not making legal accusations. My client doesn't care about characterizations, Sandra shot back. My client cares about fair compensation for his intellectual property. The terms I've outlined are reasonable. The alternative is litigation that will cost you significantly more in legal fees, damages, and lost production time than any royalty increase we're proposing. William Ashford held up his hand. Let's take a break. We need to discuss this internally. The call ended. Sandra turned to me in our private chat. They'll counter, but they're scared. That litigation specialist bills at least $400 an hour. They wouldn't have brought him in unless they knew they were exposed. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait. And while we wait, they have a decision to make. Keep producing RS-400 units and risk $150,000 per unit in damages, or stop production and start losing money every single day. She smiled. I think they'll stop within 48 hours. She was right. The counter came 2 days later. They agreed to confirm my patent ownership, offered a modest increase from 3% to 4% royalty, but rejected audit rights and the personal guarantee. Sandra rejected their counter. We demanded audit rights plus back payment for the Q1 royalty they'd planned to withhold, plus a 7% rate going forward. They came back agreeing to limited audits, but still no guarantee and not 7%. We demanded full audit rights, a personal guarantee for at least 5 years. We'd accept 5%. Back and forth it went, 3 weeks of negotiations, calls, emails, revised documents. During that time, something truly interesting happened. Hartwell's production lines went quiet. Not officially, of course. Publicly, they announced scheduled maintenance on the RS-400 equipment. Routine upgrades to improve efficiency. Nothing to worry about. Orders would be delayed, but fulfilled within acceptable timeframes. But I knew the truth. Sandra had sent a follow-up letter after our first cease and desist, notifying Hartwell that any units produced after the licensing termination date would constitute willful infringement. Each unit carried potential statutory damages. They couldn't risk it. Every RS-400 system they built was a potential lawsuit. So they stopped building them. I heard about it from Tom, my former colleague, who reached out after my termination. He called me on his personal phone after work. "Kevin, the floor is dead. Nothing moving. Management told us it's maintenance, but nobody believes that. The RS-400 line has been dark for 2 weeks. Any word on why?" Tom paused, then whispered, "There's a rumor going around, something about your patent, about you not actually signing it over to the company. Is that true?" I didn't confirm or deny. Just told Tom to keep his head down and not repeat anything he'd heard. 3 weeks of zero production on their flagship product. Customer orders piling up, delivery commitments missed, competitors circling like sharks smelling blood. I heard through industry contacts that 2 major accounts had already started conversations with other vendors. The phone calls from Granite Peak Partners to William Ashford were reportedly getting more frequent, more urgent, more angry. They'd bought Hartwell expecting a reliable cash flow from the RS-400. Instead, they were watching their investment deteriorate by the day. The final agreement came together on a Thursday afternoon. Sandra called me with the details. Her voice was pure satisfaction. "They capitulated," she said. "Full ownership confirmation, no competing claims. Royalty rate increased from 3% to 7%, retroactive to the acquisition date. Quarterly audit rights with independent verification. Personal guarantee from Granite Peak covering all obligations for the next 7 years. And one more thing," she added, "full pension vesting. They're going to reinstate your employment for the remaining 12 months, then allow you to retire with complete benefits as originally structured. You'll be on paid administrative leave during that period. No actual work required." I sat down hard on my couch. They gave me everything. "They didn't have a choice, Kevin," Sandra explained. 3 weeks of shutdown cost them more than your pension is worth. Customer relationships were deteriorating. Their projected revenue for the quarter was shot. Granite Peak's entire investment thesis for Hartwell Manufacturing depended on that RS-400 revenue stream. Without your patent, that investment is worthless. They ran the numbers. Paying you was cheaper than fighting you. So they paid. Oh, they paid. The reinstatement paperwork arrived the following week. A formal letter from William Ashford, acknowledging that my termination had been processed, in error due to miscommunication between divisions, and that I remained an employee, in good standing with all benefits intact. The letter was absolute nonsense, of course. Everyone knew what had actually happened, but it gave them cover to reverse course without admitting wrongdoing. Let them have their face-saving language. I had what I wanted. I signed the amended licensing agreement. Sandra filed all the necessary documents. The personal guarantee from Granite Peak was recorded. Everything was buttoned up. Hartwell's production lines started running again within 48 hours. I heard they brought in weekend shifts, desperate to catch up on the backlog. Some delayed orders were filled at cost just to keep customers from leaving. Over the next year, I collected my salary without working a single day. I watched from a distance as Granite Peak struggled with the consequences of their own greed. The RS-400 delays had severely damaged customer relationships that took months to rebuild. 2 of Hartwell's senior engineers quit after seeing how they treated me. They reached out privately, asked for references. I gave them good ones. The company's reputation in the industry had taken a massive hit. Word gets around. People talk at trade shows. The story of the engineer who owned his own patent and shut down production became something of a legend in manufacturing circles. Granite Peak didn't like that story being told. But there was nothing they could do about it. My royalty checks arrived quarterly. 7% instead of 3%, more than double what I'd been making. The audit reports finally showed accurate unit counts. It turned out they'd been underreporting sales by about 15% for years. That discrepancy alone added nearly $80,000 in back payments. On the anniversary of my original termination date, I officially retired. Full pension, full benefits. A small ceremony in the Hartwell conference room. William Ashford shook my hand and thanked me for my contributions, with that familiar smile that never reached his eyes. I shook back. And smiled the exact same smile I'd given Douglas Brennan a year earlier when he told me it was just business. Just business, I said. Don't take it personally. He didn't laugh. My wife was waiting in the parking lot. We drove to our favorite restaurant for lunch, ordered the most expensive thing on the menu because now we could. She raised her glass. To patience, she said. To paranoia, I replied. Same thing sometimes, she laughed. 22 years of watching you organize receipts finally paid off. Really did. 6 months after my retirement, Granite Peak sold Hartwell Manufacturing to a larger industrial conglomerate. The sale price was reportedly 20% lower than their original projections, thanks to customer attrition and competitive pressure during that shutdown period. The RS400 remained the company's top product, but the damage from those 3 weeks had lasting effects. My licensing agreement automatically transferred to the new owners. The personal guarantee from Granite Peak remained in effect for the full 7 years. The royalty checks kept coming like clockwork. I got a call from Sandra a few weeks after the sale closed. Just had an interesting conversation with the new ownership's legal team, she said. They wanted to understand the licensing terms before they finalized the acquisition. What did you tell them? I asked. The truth. That you own a patent generating 40% of their newly acquired revenue stream. That the licensing agreement is ironclad. That any attempt to modify terms without your consent would result in immediate termination and production shutdown. How did they take it? Better than Granite Peak did. The new general counsel actually complimented the contract structure. Said it was some of the cleanest IP licensing he'd ever seen. Asked if you'd be interested in consulting on future development. I laughed. Consulting? Apparently your reputation precedes you. The engineer who outmaneuvered a private equity firm. They think you might have useful perspective. Funny how that works. Last month, I got an official letter from Hartwell's new engineering director. They were developing an upgraded version of the RS400 and wanted to know if I'd be interested in consulting. Market rates, plus a bonus for any patentable improvements. I wrote back with one condition. Any new patents developed during the engagement would remain my property, licensed to Hartwell under terms I'd negotiate separately. They agreed immediately. My first consulting session was 2 weeks ago. They flew me out to the facility, put me up in a nice hotel. The new engineering team had already started on some promising concepts but hit a wall with a thermal management system. The same problem I'd solved 15 years ago, just with a different approach. Took me about 4 hours to sketch out a solution. They looked at me like I'd performed a magic trick. The team lead, a guy named Bennett, pulled me aside after the session. Said he'd heard stories about what happened with Granite Peak, said everyone in the industry had heard. Asked if the rumors were true. I told him the rumors were probably conservative. He laughed. Said it was nice to finally meet the guy who taught private equity a lesson about reading contracts. My second session is next month. They're already talking about a retainer arrangement. So here's the final scorecard in cold, hard numbers. My pension? That's $1.2 million in lifetime benefits fully vested. Checks arrive on the 1st of every month. My royalty rate? Increased from 3% to 7%. That's an extra $180,000 per year compared to what I was making before. Back payments from audit discrepancies? $80,000. Turns out they'd been underreporting for years. Legal fees? $45,000 and worth every single penny. Consulting income? $4,800 for that first session alone and more coming. And the cost to Granite Peak for trying to steal my patent? 3 weeks of production shutdown. Customer attrition that dropped their sale price by 20%. Legal fees north of $100,000 not counting the specialists. And Douglas Brennan's career. 4 months after the Hartwell sale closed, Granite Peak let him go. Official reason was restructuring. Real reason? The Hartwell situation became a case study in what not to do. His hidden IP clause nearly cost them their entire investment. His position became untenable overnight. Last I heard, he was working at a smaller firm in Cincinnati. A significant step down. Someone who knew him said he'd become very careful about reviewing termination documents now. William Ashford? He landed at another private equity portfolio company 6 weeks later. Similar role, different industry. Some people just fail upward, I guess. Tom, my former colleague who kept me informed during the shutdown, he got promoted to lead the engineering team after the senior guys quit. He called me last week to thank me for the reference I'd given him years ago. Said the new ownership was actually listening to the engineers for once. The patent litigation specialist Granite Peak hired? He never did any actual litigation. Billed them $28,000 for 3 weeks of meetings and analysis. Added to the list. My wife and I? We booked a trip to Italy for next spring. 3 weeks. Rome, Florence, Venice. Using the back payment money. Seemed fitting. My workshop in the garage is still running. Got a new project going that has nothing to do with sealing mechanisms. Just something interesting. No corporate entanglements. Just me and the problem. So that's the story. 22 years at a company, 1 year from pension vesting. A CFO who thought he could bury an IP theft clause in my severance paperwork. A production line that went dark the moment they realized what they'd done. The cease and desist was 16 pages. The amended licensing agreement was 23. The smile I gave Douglas Brennan when he fired me was the same one I gave William Ashford at my retirement ceremony. Just business. Don't take it personally. They told me that first. I just said it back. Oh, and here's a quick update 3 months later. The consulting retainer came through, 12 sessions a year at $4,800 each, plus bonuses for patentable improvements, plus travel expenses covered. The new ownership sends a car to pick me up from the airport now. A completely different energy from the Granite Peak days. I even ran into Patricia Davenport at a trade show last month. She'd heard the whole story from someone on the board. She grabbed my arm and said she was sorry about what happened after the sale, said she'd had no idea they would try something like that. I told her it worked out fine. Better than fine, actually. She laughed. Said she always knew I was the smart one. I filed my first new patent last month. A variable temperature calibration system for the RS400 upgrade. Patent will be in my name, licensed to Hartwell under the same terms as the original. Sandra reviewed everything. Bulletproof as usual. Douglas Brennan apparently tried to get hired at another private equity firm in Chicago. They called Granite Peak for a reference. The reference was, let's just say, not favorable. Word is they specifically mentioned the Hartwell situation. He ended up taking a position as director of finance, not CFO, at a regional manufacturing company in Ohio. I bet he reviews every termination document personally now. Tom called me again last week. Said the RS400 upgrade prototype ran its first successful test cycle, using my thermal management solution. Said my name came up in the leadership meeting as someone who should be recognized. I told him recognition wasn't necessary. The royalty checks are recognition enough. My wife finished planning the Italy trip. 3 weeks, Rome, Florence, Venice, leaving in April. She's already bought new luggage. Says we should have done this years ago, but I was always too busy working. She's not wrong. The pension check arrived yesterday. $4,247 direct deposit, right on schedule. Most of it went into the travel fund. The rest towards some new equipment for the workshop. 22 years of keeping receipts. 18 months of garage workshop development. 15 years of royalty payments. 3 weeks of production shutdown. One CFO who learned an expensive lesson about reading employment contracts before trying to steal patents. They said it was just business. Turns out I'm pretty damn good at business. So what do you think? Was I justified in how I handled this, or was I too harsh? What would you have done in my place? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I truly want to hear what you have to say.